Hello, everybody. My name is Michael Meehan. I'm the Director of Communications at Northeast Clean Energy Council. We're speaking today with Amy Duffuor. She's the co-founder and general partner at Azolla Ventures and an NECEC board member. We're happy to have you here today, Amy, to talk to us about diversity in the climate economy. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great. Thanks so much for having me, Michael.
Thanks so much for being here. Amy is Amy's a superstar. She's got a lot of money to give out. Everybody should get to know her in the in the general universe if you have a great climate economy idea. But we're going to talk today about you and your personal experience in getting into this space and what it's been like. And I want to take you all the way back to the beginning. You're young. It's the 2000s. The economy has just erupted, and you're doing. I've never seen anybody with more internships actually listed. So you've worked in more places, I think, than most people could imagine. And so, what was it like for you coming in as a young Black woman into that space and just getting your feet wet? And what did you learn about the world and how you fit into it? How you're gonna find your way through it at that time.
Right. It's very funny. I feel like as a millennial, they often will call us a lost generation because of the financial crisis. And I did do a number of internships. There weren't a ton of jobs available. But look, I think one of the things that I really learned from working in different places and in different industries, that it's very critical to be able to connect with people on different levels because we all look differently. We come from different backgrounds. And at the end of the day, we're all humans. And so being able to move with ease and authenticity in different spaces became very important, whether I was an intern at an architecture center in New York or a jazz label or, at one of the largest foundations in California, later on in life when I was in business school, being able to have that confidence and that ability to connect with different types of people, I think was the most valuable lesson that I learned from those many jobs and internships.
And along the way, you caught the bug for clean energy and the climate economy. I'm curious, how long did that take to emerge as you were going through that experience? How long did it take for you to sort of find your niche there and then say, hey, I got something to offer here?
It took some time. So, I started out my career as an immigration researcher. So I was primarily looking at marginalized West African migrant communities, both in the UK and in the US, and looking at how they were involved in terms of civic engagement. And so I found that job very meaningful. But at the time, I was studying and got into a PhD program and realized it wasn't super practical. I had gotten into the space because I really wanted to change, although it seems silly, be helpful and assist changing some of the livelihoods of these marginalized people. And, in a PhD program at the time, people were much more concerned with producing knowledge for knowledge's sake. And that's not what I was interested in doing. And so it took me some time to get there, first with the detour in supply chain and procurement management consulting. But I became much more passionate about the climate space probably about a decade ago. I had just moved to Singapore. Initially, I was working at an investment bank, but ended up at an impact investing firm called IIX, where our role was to scale Asian social and environmental businesses that intentionally had impact as part of their business model. And I worked across a lot of different types of businesses, but the clean energy companies that I worked with were really speaking to me. I mean, Southeast Asia is one of the most vulnerable places in the world to climate change. And it was at that moment where I became very religious about it. I was like, if we don't solve this, nothing else matters. And also that a lot of the discussion in the climate space at that time, I felt was very one beat. So we're only focused on, GHG emissions reductions. And I thought, no, climate impacts, yes, we need to focus on GHG, but it impacts, how people move from place to place, connecting the way that I started my career. It impacts our human health, what we eat, how we learn. It impacts everything. And I really became attracted to having a career in early stage venture in the climate space because I wanted to highlight a lot of those intersectional impacts that I felt were being woefully kind of ignored.
Excellent. And this ties in with where you started. You've worked in a lot of different countries. I'm curious as to what your experience as a young Black woman in different cultures has been. When have you found differences between times when you're running into, oh, this is because I'm young, or this is because I'm a woman, or this is because I'm a person of color? Like, how is that, as you've gone around the world, how have you found that has shifted on you, I guess?
Now that's a great question. So I'm from the Philadelphia area, as are you. So I love that we have that in common, Michael.
Yo.
And the UK was interesting for me. That's where I started out really kind of full-time professional work. And there, I was a young person. And so people obviously take some time to trust what you're saying. But in that instance, I honestly felt it was because I was the only American at the time that was working in my consulting office. And so people were not used to a very friendly, direct person. I remember somebody gave me feedback once. I was coming into the office always very cheery, saying, "Hi, I'm Amy." And they said, "Can you not be so cheery at 8 a.m. in the morning? Just bring it back." And I was like, "Oh, okay." Yeah. We're just so happy and friendly. In working in Singapore and around Southeast Asia, and I did a lot of work in the Philippines, there is not a very large Black population there, especially outside of some of the kind of military bases. And so there was less familiarity with what it was like to be a Black person. And I kind of felt like I was operating on a blank slate. And there and across other parts of Southeast Asia, felt like my gender became more important because I think on average, it can be a bit more hierarchical working in Asia, and
a little bit, yeah.
And there weren't as many women at the time when I was there over a decade ago that were doing that work. So I felt like that became the key identity that I was somewhat pushing against, being a woman and younger. And then now bringing it back to the kind of present day, when I think about my career in early stage venture, when I started, there were very few Black women who were general partners or partners at venture funds. That is still the case today, but there are more than there were several years ago. And there, I've definitely had to navigate the confluence of age, gender, as well as race. And that makes things to be, particularly tricky. Someone asking me if I'm the secretary and should I take notes? And I'm like, I'm not.
No, you got $100 million in your pocket. No, I'm not here for your coffee order. Yeah. So I'm curious, we were talking earlier before we started this, you were saying that when you finally got deep into the financial world, you're really being judged on how much money you were making. And it's different in the climate space. I'm curious, if you could sum that up for our listeners as to, what are these different objectives like?
Right. So before I came into the early stage climate venture space, I was an investment banker, actually a renewables and power investment banker. And what's fascinating about working at an investment bank is that your primary objective is to help the firm, make money and keep the money it has. And so financials are like the number one goal, whether it's, running models, whether it's preparing decks, whether it's working with clients to help them on their IPO. And it was quite interesting because there's one clear metric that everyone is working towards. In the climate space, it is so much more diverse. I mean, you are thinking about greenhouse gas emissions reductions. You are thinking about local communities and equity and justice. You are thinking about ecological impacts. You are thinking about so many different things, and it really requires a multifaceted approach to thinking about the climate crisis and the climate economy. And that takes some time and thought, and it's not one beat, which is something that I really love. It's both a challenge and an opportunity.
And how often, I guess, have you run into people just assuming that you've got the answers? Like, hey, we need to figure out diversity, inclusion, equity, inclusion, and justice. Amy, how do we do that?
Sadly, many times it was more so, after the tragic aftermath of George Floyd, because I think a lot of companies and organizations were figuring out, oh my gosh, we have a diversity problem. Venture was no different. What do we do? And I got a lot of people reaching out about, help me figure out, diversity in my investment pipeline, and hiring more, diverse venture investors, and sitting on this panel on, diversity. And, in the beginning, it was a little bit frustrating to be seen in one lens, although I genuinely do believe there's a problem and I want to be helpful. I think now that's changed mostly because of saying no. No can be a love word.
Yep.
And while it's not as diverse as I would frankly like in the early stage climate VC space, there have been a lot of strides that the space has made. I mean, before I could count on probably two hands the number of Black venture investors across different climate tech funds. And, that's increased. I don't want to say like threefold, but it's definitely increased. And so I'm proud of some of that progress that's been made.
And final question, looking back at where you started and where we are today, would it be a lot different for you coming into this space now? Do you see where you and other, women, people of color, young people, millennials, hell, let's just, give a generation a prop, have been able to change the landscape at all, or is it still kind of the same world?
I definitely don't think it's the same world. I mean, in the early 2000s, we were much less connected, via the internet, via social media. Even though social media was still there, it was relegated to like a few platforms than we are today. And so people are finding information much faster. People are making connections and having people serve as mentors for those they've never even met face to face. And that just wasn't the case, 20 or so odd years ago. I think what feels encouraging is that there's so many different types of groups that are seeing gaps in the climate space and that are coming together. Something I feel really warms my heart as I came back last week from a Black Women in Venture Capital retreat. Second year that they did it, but I remember the first year when we were thinking about doing it, and to find this amazing group of women who started as like a WhatsApp group with 20 people and now has grown into, a 100-person organization. Like, people are actively organizing and coordinating when they see gaps, and there's a lot of power in that, and also a lot of beauty. And so I think that is something that has really been a shift from when I started, and I'm really, really grateful.
It's amazing what happens when you finally ask the people you ignored for a long time what maybe we could do, isn't it?
Yeah, just
Yeah,
a little amazing.
it's like, oh yeah, well, now that you're asking me, there are some there. I've got a few suggestions. Anyway, thank you so much for being with us today, Amy. We'll be seeing you at other NECEC events in the near future, I'm sure. Everybody, if you've got a great business idea, again, just make a friend with Amy. So,
now I'm gonna have
anyway,
thousands of people hitting my inbox, but I appreciate that for you, Michael.
that's okay. I hope you can monetize it up all the way to. I hope the next time we talk, I'm talking about how you've got billions of dollars in your pocket.
We're going to speak it into existence. No, but seriously, thank you. I always have time for NECEC, and I'm really grateful to be part of this organization. So
excellent. Thank you so much. And thank you to everybody who's watched today. Thank you.